So, if you want to start studying philosophy but have absolutely no idea where to begin, here are 5 books I would recommend. Welcome to Book Labyrinth, where we unravel the stories behind the pages. And I don't mean 5 books you need to read as quickly as possible. Think of these as 5 books that can give you a path into philosophy, from learning how philosophers ask questions, to dealing with knowledge, how to live, and eventually how we should structure society. The first book is Think by Simon Blackburn. This is probably where I would start if you know almost nothing about philosophy. The reason I like this book is that it doesn't assume you already understand philosophical terminology. Blackburn introduces questions that almost everyone has wondered about at some point. Do we actually have free will? How do we know what we know? Does God exist? What makes something morally right or wrong? And what exactly is the self? The important thing here isn't necessarily finding the correct answer. It's learning how to think about the question. And that's one of the biggest differences between studying philosophy and simply reading books about philosophy. You're not just collecting opinions. You're learning how to examine assumptions, identify arguments, and ask whether a conclusion actually follows from its premises. Once you've gotten comfortable with those questions, I would move on to The Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. Russell's book is short, clear, and was specifically written for people who weren't professional philosophers. One of the things Russell does particularly well is show you why ordinary things become philosophical problems once you start looking closely at them. For example, how do you know that the world outside your mind actually exists? How do you know that your senses are reliable? What does it mean to actually know something? These questions might sound abstract at first, but they're incredibly important because they force you to examine beliefs that you normally take for granted. And there's a chapter near the end of the book that I think is especially worth reading. Russell talks about the value of philosophy itself. His point isn't that philosophy gives you a giant list of answers. Instead, philosophy expands the range of possibilities you can see. It makes you more comfortable with uncertainty, more willing to question your assumptions, and more capable of seeing beyond your immediate perspective. After those 2 introductory books, I'd start reading primary philosophical texts. And the first one I'd recommend is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This book is very different from the first 2. You're no longer reading someone explaining philosophy to you. You're reading the personal reflections of a Roman emperor trying to figure out how to live. And that's what makes Meditations so interesting. Marcus Aurelius keeps returning to questions like, what can I actually control? How should I respond when other people treat me badly? How should I deal with suffering? How should I think about death? And what does it mean to live a good life? You don't have to agree with Stoicism to get something from this book. In fact, I think it's better to approach it as an experiment. Read what Marcus says. Ask yourself whether you agree. Then ask yourself why. That is philosophy in practice. Next, I'd move in a very different direction with Meditations on First Philosophy by René Descartes. If Marcus Aurelius asks, how should I live? Descartes asks something more fundamental. How can I know anything at all? This is where you start getting into epistemology, the philosophical study of knowledge. Descartes takes skepticism extremely seriously. He begins by questioning almost everything he thinks he knows. Can I trust my senses? Could I be dreaming? Could everything I experience be misleading me? And if I doubt everything, is there at least one thing I cannot doubt? This is where you get his famous idea. I think, therefore, I am. The basic idea is that even if Descartes doubts everything else, he cannot doubt the fact that he is thinking. And from that starting point, he attempts to build a foundation for knowledge. Now, don't expect to read Descartes once and completely understand him. You probably won't. And that's okay. Philosophy isn't supposed to be a book you finish and immediately understand perfectly. Sometimes the fact that you think you found a problem in a philosopher's argument is actually the beginning of understanding the argument. Finally, I'd recommend On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. So far, we've looked at questions about philosophy itself, knowledge, and how to live. Now we move outward. How should human beings live together? How much freedom should individuals have? When is society justified in restricting someone's behavior? And what happens when the majority decides that someone's beliefs or lifestyle are wrong? Mill's On Liberty is one of the foundational texts for modern discussions about individual freedom. And it's worth reading because ideas like freedom, individuality, and personal autonomy are so familiar to us that we can forget to ask where those ideas came from. Mill forces you to think about the limits of social power. Not just the power of governments, but also the power of other people and the majority. And that's an incredibly relevant philosophical problem even today. So if I were building a beginner's philosophy reading list, I wouldn't treat these 5 books as a checklist. I'd read them as a progression. Start with Think to learn what kinds of questions philosophy asks. Move to the Problems of Philosophy to start questioning your assumptions about knowledge and reality. Read Meditations to see philosophy being used as a way of life. Then read Descartes to seriously investigate what knowledge actually means. And finally, read On Liberty to explore what freedom should look like in a society. And after these 5 books, don't worry about having finished philosophy. You haven't. You've just started. Because the more philosophy you read, the more questions you discover. And that's actually the point. Philosophy isn't a checklist of famous books or famous philosophers. It's a lifelong practice of questioning what you believe, understanding why you believe it, and becoming more comfortable with ideas that challenge you. So if you've been waiting for the perfect time to start studying philosophy, don't. Pick one of these books, open the first page, and start asking better questions. If there's a book you'd like me to review, just drop the title in the comments. Need the ebook? Message me on Telegram. And if this video was useful to you, a small coffee donation goes a long way in keeping this channel going.